Good morning. In this class of Science Humanities, today, May 20th, Thursday, we are continuing the topic we previously described on Tuesday. So with the topic of death of big data, as you already know, I already described the topic of death. Death itself is very tough one to be a discussed one, but so without this concept, to my knowledge, to my understanding, it is very difficult to understand, to interpret, to understand nature. So that's why I took this one into this that one of the topics we are going to discuss this one to get at the levels of public with big data, so to be involved in nature. So the big data, once again, please remind you of yourself. We already discussed the last week from Oxford Professor Timothy Lee, 1989 WWW, based on his HTML language. So he already revealed his design of WWW, World Wide Web, with many different instruments at that time, not revealed yet, but he imagined, so at least the design, all of those to be implemented by another technology. At that time, it was magic, looks like magic, but after 10 years, it was a technology to complete his idea of a WWW in 1998. So through such tools. So another 10 years later, so we recognize presence of a business model provided by the Google after the big bubble crisis in economy in US. So centering around the hedge fund. So one of the derivatives. So we already discussed through the movie Big Short. The Big Short itself is one of derivatives. So from capitalism types of involvement of the capital into our economic worlds. So the bubble is actually collapsed in 2007, right? And after 1 year, so the people try to find some kind of model. Behind those model is actually without any object, but as a reality. So through those models, they try to prove those models to explain those bubble collapse in US, centering around the hedge fund and other mortgage loan and derivative, and more importantly, the capital. So and after that, we recognize there is one of the model supported by big data in the name of the Google's business model. And after that, we recognize web exactly what could be the basic logic behind this web, which is a semantic web. The professor, the Timothy Lee, already mentioned almost 25 years ago, back in 1989 from Oxford. So with this web connected socially, individually, in network types of that, and then we select one site of this site, the Indonesia to other. So based on those kind of a perception-based selection by the public to go to a site of interest to the public. So they even, including us, for example, including myself, including yourself, we don't know exactly what the logic govern our selection, but from our feeling, from our sense, five sense, the plus one sense out of the beyond the 5 sense, aided by technology, aided by the other instrument like microscope, iPhones, or whatever that is. So we've been helped to be involved those observation in the world and the sea of the WWW to select a site over the other site. So because good is good and bad is bad, so we prefer to visit those sites because we would like to buy, we would like to order, we would like to enjoy, we would like to get information out of certain things. There is the revealed and shown the logics, but behind there is. That's why I'd like to remind you what we have to be careful about from this semantic web. So once again, from Oxford Professor Timothy Bernard-Lee already warned us, asked us to think of a more in detailed way. So that his design of WWW is not based on hermeneutic web, including interpretations. So just we select the meanings based on our taste. So once again, we already mentioned this one, to judge. So you judge whenever you visit SNS, whenever you visit the market, whenever you visit library, whenever you visit outlet. So you are asked to judge. So based on this one, we may hypothesis. So with which we are going to judge. So first one, we find the value. We find a certain taste. Like in apartment is valuable, house is valuable, Bitcoin is valuable. A certain class is valuable than compared to others. So a certain university you would like to enter into is more valuable than the other. Certain company like Samsung, LG, and Amazon is more valuable or preferable by yourself over the other company, the other universities. So first things we observe. So from market, from SNS, from information, a lot of information word, you select one based on this the semantic way. In a semantic way, you are continuously selecting something the valuable, something preferable by yourself. Like example 1, and then we interpret. So value, whatever that is, what kind of value, depending on your definition, the value maybe belong to an apartment. So that's the interpretation. So other possible interpretations to put certain value in another one is also possible, but we select the possibility out of an alternative possibility. So at the level 1, apartment is valuable. So we just observe, we just select. At the level of number 2, interpretation step. So over other values, so we select a certain value based on our logics, based on our course, based on our philosophy, based on our science under which we understand the nature and other world, my preference as well, and connections, more importantly. And then we go to step 3, which is a communication level. To bind up with other persons, other community, other countries, other information as well. So if you select the number 1 with your preferred value and go to without interpretation step, go to number 3 levels. So that's the business model provided by the big data of the Google and Amazon, for example. Why? There is no hermeneutic step. But if you go through number 1 step, number 2 step as well, to go to 3, that's the hermeneutic web. Hermeneutic web instead of a semantic web. So there are tiny or little difference in definition between those models, but we have to be careful because long time ago, back in 1989, the Professor Timothy Berners-Lee from Oxford proposed, he designed the WWW, World Wide Web, based on these semantic logics. So please think about whenever you visit the internet, some kind of a site. So please remember why you are going to follow or flow through this logic of a semantic instead of a hermeneutic. That's the definitions, but we can change. So whenever we talk about the big data, so we need infrastructure of a highway, infrastructure of a computer, infrastructure of big data, types of storage, and cloud, right? The cloud, the petabytes data will require a system of clouds for storage of the big data. And then we recognize what we are doing, how we gather information, other persons, we deliver your information to other persons to communicate. Because we want to establish a system based on those communication to comprise of a word, the times. Okay, so number 1, number 2, number 3 is almost impossible in semantic web. So how we overcome this one? Through we already discussed many times. So platform as a code. If we design the properly assigned to be used for our communication with these informations, to add some into big data through different business model, we need what? Interpretation step with only with platform as code. So that's why we need to design the new science for education, for university, for economic transaction in the market. Even capital investment like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is money as well, but Bitcoin, so you use Bitcoin to buy something right now, it is possible to buy a Tesla car, but more importantly, the Bitcoin is capital itself, the object of investment. More importantly, the person interested in Bitcoin, why? It's capital. It's capital. If it is money and currency, that is not that much popular. Of course, we like those stuff, the style to be used as with the logic of a blockchain. But blockchain is a connection paradigm. Sometimes we have to overcome. We already discussed, especially in digital times. So everything is judged. So you are judging right now my lecture, your participation, our word, our pandemic tactic, by university, by your friend, by your colleagues, the society of parents. So every time we judge based on this one. So we look around, right? Look around to get at, to arrive at, to reach some valuable things of interest to us. And then we go to communicate those. So that's the one way. Without any interpretation step. It's Sometimes it is very effective, efficient to get at conclusion, kind of, without any interpretation. So we call that as mannerism types of approach to obtain the knowledge over observations, for example, based on our sense. But we have to make a reality with interpretation. The step 2, right? The step 2, hermeneutic step 2. So that's why we need due science to be used for our platform as code. So that's why we discuss 2 weeks about infrastructure and subsequently design the platform as code with science. So we can use money, but we can design new money as a sign. We can use grade. We can use distinction and degree after graduation, but we can use a different sign for our university, for our new education system. And then we communicate with what? Science. So you communicate with money. The grandmother to probably give you her affections, liking, and consideration, right? That's the communication with the sign of what? Money, Korean one. So you give a gift, present to your boyfriend and girlfriend as a sign. So those are tools and instruments to discuss, to communicate in a system. And then if you change those languages, those signs, so you can change system. You can change subsequently society. So if you don't like our education system with the grade, with the ranking, with discriminations between gender and everything, so you may argue, you may criticize, you may be angry about it, but subsequently, alternatively, in alternative way, you can make a sign and design platform with those signs as a code, and then you switch. You can change paradigm all over the bottoms. Okay, that's my proposal. So instead of being angry, being frustrated, so many times we've been angry, we've been frustrated from many different policies, the consequences out of the climate change crisis. Then I'd like to suggest to you, instead of being angry, being frustrated, and then we select the design of a new science. What could be substitutes for our grading systems, degree systems? It looks very difficult and almost impossible, but still possible, I believe. So you are young, you are digital generation, being born after 1989, after WWW, you can do that. You can propose new sign, new platforms, not profit gaining business model, but the public business model. You can do that, and to be spread to the public. That's why we study right now. That's why we are worrying about our world under digital logics. So big data, for example. So when a person observe others earn lots of profit out of capital, such as derivative like big shorts, hedge fund, and Bitcoin as well. Not everyone, but normally, a lot of person actually in this time under pandemic crisis, pandemic catastrophe, the person goes there without interpretations to make a communications, to earn some profit in a stock market, in capital market, in housing market. But keep in mind, so we all living together with the business model, especially from Google. So that's why with that, we finally understand why long time ago, 1929, almost 100 years ago. Okay. Why René Magritte make this artistic work with his sentence? This is not a pipe. It looks pipe, but this is painting only. This is only image. Image is very important, I agree. So sometimes it looks reality. It is reality sometimes because we have to use another sense, the beyond five senses, to obtain the concept as knowledge, to understand our world, how it goes, how it connected each other. So we need some kind, we need the image, we need the sensation types of image and experience types of image to be connected to interpret and understand the nature. That's what we call that as a systematic study, which is a science. So we know that why he warned us almost 100 years ago. So we have to differentiate what we believe reality, what we don't believe reality. Reality is very important from Immanuel Kant. So reality is one of a qualitative concept we have to live with those logics. The secondary, so the semantic web, in addition to the search engines. So we've been using science as a death. Even if we did not experience the death. So Google and Amazon, they didn't experience death at all, but they have a capacity. They are able to use the concept of a death. So at the end of all activity, I already mentioned on Tuesday, we have something as a sign to combine everything into one dot, one point, as a sign to represent everything. Okay. So after graduation, in the graduation ceremony, so someone asks you to summarize all activity of yours to transfer meaningful selection of yours and value of yours to other persons so that they can select you to work together with them. And then you need 1 day or 2 days to summarize all activities of yours during class, during your project, your thesis. But instead of everything that you show what? Your sign as a death in the forms of transcript, dissertation, degree. Okay, that's the death, the concept of death. So Google used this one exactly because they understand that this death of a sign from all the activities from the public, okay, to show their value of their service and product to the public through big data. Okay, so that's the, for example, money for our all transaction in market. Come up with money as a sign of death of all activity, all transaction in the market. Transcript, once again, a degree of all activity, research, the project during stay at the UNIST, as a death of your activity, ranking as well. So you are top 10 of students. That's the sign, right? That's the sign as a death of your activities. So people recognize, people see only a sign instead of looking at whole you provided during stay at UNIST, but the company, the people, organizations, they only look at your sign, such as ranking, transcript, degree, what department you are going to graduate from. For example, someone asks you to show your wealth. Someone asked me to show my wealth, to criticize what I have been achieving during my life. For example, how much money do I have? They interested in to criticize myself as a sign, through sign, as death. So that's the real right now. That's the real world we are experiencing right now. During communication through the smartphone, we've been using emoticon, right? Emoticon. That's the feeling and emotion sign at SNS. So through those signs, so there could be death of all our communication through SNS. So everything is like that. You may argue we are not only provide our the sign as death, but also provided a lot of other things. But what could be real? What could be reality, actuality, as a representative, the signal and sign from your activity, from your connection to the world. So that's the reality we are facing with right now. That's why. So please be interested in, even if it is very difficult to design your own sign, our own sign for our society in the future, to represent all our totality into one point, even with this, so which hopefully does not have any ranking discriminations between gender, between races, between what you own, depending on what you own, in terms of money, in terms of housing, and to announce, more importantly, to inaugurate our own future with the potentiality, to show your potential to other persons through a sign newly designed based on our new philosophy, new logic. So that's the why we would like to discuss the concept of death. Death is not only end of our all activity with a point, which is a sign, but also we would like to inaugurate, announce our own future with potentiality without any ranking, without discriminations, based on the race, wealth, and genus, even together with animal, together with other living organisms like a tree, then we can design all the nature. So Stephen Hawking mentioned in his book of grand theory of design, right? So I'm confused about he wrote that book. So we are talking about the science. You don't agree? But please stick to this definition of a science done by the famous physicist Albert Einstein, long time ago, 1938. So he wrote this one, The Evolution of Physics. In his book, The Science Science is the newly defined as a creation of a human mind. Human mind, not just a collection of law, but filled with what? Idea and concept, freely created. So if you designed some concepts of depth, concept of activity, concept of knowledge, then you have to be free. You have to be free. The free means without any conditions. The control by other persons, other frame. But only nature. Nature is a complex one. If you combine the Newton's law between particles, you combine everything. So we have a gene. The 40,000 genes, for example. You combine everything into one logic. You can explain every activity between 40,000 genes into the place at the genes. It is impossible, almost impossible, but there is a law. So even if we do not find it yet, okay, between two particles, by Newton's, we can know cause and result, causality, right? That's Newton's law. With this particle, we have an orbit law, based on Propecia, written by Newton, Isaac Newton, a long time ago. That's the physics we know. But beyond those one, by combining 40,000 particle pair connection between the two particles into one, that could be nature. Even if we are very difficult to define and explain those phenomena, but we know that there is a physics, there is a law, even if it is very complicated as well as complex, but there is. That's why, as a success of Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein defined science newly beyond physical one, creation of human mind. Creation of human mind is one of the physics with invented idea and concept. That's why he named his book as Evolution. Okay, what do you mean by the evolution? Evolution is like a biological words, seemingly, of physics. So you can remind yourself, Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin is well known as a second Newton. We might think of or imagine Albert Einstein as great successor of Isaac Newton should be a second Newton, but actually the history of science for a certain book that he proposed. So the author proposed Charles Darwin is the second Newton. Why? Evolution from the nature, nature selected certain things based on physics. I already mentioned, so we combine every 40,000 particle interaction into one. Then we can explain science, nature, and complexity of science, complexity of the particles, complexity of the universe. That's the science. Even we don't know yet, but that's why somebody mentioned evolution. Somebody mentioned nature. Somebody mentioned nature's selection. Somebody mentioned grand theory of the universe. Have you read Richard Dawkins, the book, famous book of his, Selfish Gene? So what's the critical point he would like to deliver to you through that book of a Selfish Gene? It's a nature, right? Natural selections. In the molecular level, we know it is governed by Newton, but greatest successor of this one, Albert Einstein, Charles Darwin, they know nature of the particle, of the gene levels. Then we combine everything into one. We know complex of the nature, of the science, of the physics and biology, even between our the human minds, to compose society. Society should be explained by the science in a new definition proposed by Albert Einstein and Charles Darwin and Richard Dawkins. That's the nature. So we are discussing about science of humanity. Why we have this name? We know science from Einstein and Newton, but we also know the humanity from Einstein's definition. As in Einstein's definition, we are doing creation of a human mind to be connected to comprise science in a big data, newly formed in a digital world, especially in the future, under the Anthropocene times. That's why I propose to communicate effectively in an efficient way, new science, to design platform as code. Otherwise, big business model, Google's business model, for example, because there's a kind of a shallow the model. But we would like to put our understanding of nature, understanding of science into the sea of big data newly. Okay, that's my message. That's why. So I'd like to ask you, or it is my opinion, of course, it is my opinion. The science is a systematic study defined by dictionary. Okay, the Charles Darwin is called the second Newton. I already mentioned, rather than Einstein. Einstein agreed, okay, by writing Evolution of Physics. He used the terminology of evolutions after Charles Darwin. It is the personal opinion of mine. If you have any others, so you can argue. You can have your own understanding of science newly. But we are living in the digital society. After Newton, after Darwin, after Einstein, even after business model, then we have to have a new understanding of our nature, based on science, based on data, because data is the OA, right? So we are experiencing a lot of different events and consequences as a result out of that big data. Okay, that's why we have to understand everything into a nature through science, through understanding of those with the complexity. Okay, we can do that, I believe, even if nobody knows yet, nobody have any bother to explain, to interpret the nature, but we can do that through at least close to the truth we believe as nature. So that's my message. So the next week, so we are going to discuss about art. Isaac Newton. Between Isaac Newton and Charles Darwin, there is one interesting scientist, Johann Wolfgang Goethe. Everyone knows Goethe is a poem, an artist as well, literary artist, but he was a scientist as well. So that's we starting the example or his opinion is delivered by Goethe with regard to the Newton's achievement, we start importance and the significance of art, so to understand our world in an alternative way. Okay, any questions?